Can you give us sort of the track and the timing and what concerns you the most about Irma?
Yeah, the center of Irma now is located about 1,400 miles to the east of the Florida Peninsula. It's much closer to the Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, and it's going to be affecting them in the next 24 hours with hurricane conditions. As far as what we're looking for in the future, track of the storm comes through here to the west, and by early in the weekend is near or along the north coast of Cuba and then turns northward towards Florida. Where that turn occurs is critical. Don't quite know yet because it's 5 days out from now. At this point with a Category 5 hurricane, though, potentially catastrophic in terms of wind and storm surge. And also we have, of course, concerns from flooding from rain.
You mentioned Category 5 strength and that it could potentially make landfall. If it does make landfall in the U.S., do you think it has the potential to stay a Category 5? Any way of telling that right now?
At this point, we're forecasting the intensity to be Category 4 to Category 5 for the next couple of days and to approach the Florida Peninsula and the Florida Keys at that intensity. Whether it stays as a 4 or 5, we don't know, but either way could be devastating impacts.
And you mentioned storm surge. When you talk about that, it's particularly for the state of Florida, who's the most vulnerable down in that south area?
Well, the entire coastal area is going to be at risk from storm surge, and that includes both the east coast and the west coast of Florida, as well as the Florida Keys. So this area here is very much at risk for inundation from storm surge.
It's almost practically half the state from our vantage point here, it seems like. I want to ask you about this potential storm that's right on the heels of Harvey. How common is it for there to be two storms in such a short time frame?
It's not that unusual to have two storms that are very intense right behind each other, one right behind the other. We had that some years ago with Hurricane David and Frederick, for those who are history buffs. And those are both major hurricanes, as are these two, Harvey and Irma, but it doesn't happen every year for sure.
There's also another tropical storm churning in the Atlantic, Tropical Storm Jose. What do we know about that?
Yeah, at this point, that's not the main threat. There is some risk for an impact, again, towards to the Leeward Islands in a few days, but by far the biggest concern is for Irma. There
were some concerns, some false reports out there that Irma could strengthen to Category 6. Can you explain why that's fake?
Well, first, there is no Category 6. Category 5 is open-ended. And at this point, it really doesn't matter whether the wind speed goes up by 5 or 10 miles per hour, down by 5 or 10 miles per hour. It's potentially devastating hurricane at any of those speeds.
Ed Rappaport, thank you for joining us, Ed.
Thank you.
Well, the governor of Florida will give an update that
hurricane warnings are up for Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. This monster storm is now posing a major threat to millions of people in Florida. So let's get right to CNN meteorologist Chad Myers with the latest forecast. You predicted this within the past few minutes, Chad, and now here we are.
Well, we just watched the Hurricane Hunter aircraft fly through it, Allison, and we saw wind gusts of 186 and 192 aloft, where planes fly, 7,000 feet. That's where those Hurricane Hunter aircraft, you tried to say, fly. But the fact is now the winds are getting down to the surface here, probably close to 175. So Anguilla and the BVI and the U.S. Virgin Islands, you are under warnings, and it's a done deal for you. You are going to get this storm. You are going to get the track of the storm right over some of those islands. And if you do, the winds at 175 will be devastating. As we move it along to the DR and to Haiti, there's a lot of mountainous areas here. That may tear the storm up a little bit. But notice what happened at the 8 o'clock advisory. This number at 5 o'clock said the storm in the Florida Straits somewhere around 130. Now it says 150. So that's even more impressive because the storm back here is more impressive. There are mountains in here, and those mountains will catch some of the rain. It will tear the storm up just a little bit. So this track, although not quite set in stone, is certainly pretty, obvious where this thing probably goes. The storm size may still be significantly different from where we are now. Let me just say this. If you're retired in South Florida and you have kids in Michigan, time to go visit. That's at least for now. I mean, this is still 4 to 5 days away, but, why hang out?
Right. Sure looks like it.
Those models, all of them, very, very ominous. ago, it did become that Category 5 hurricane. The hurricane hunters were flying into it 175 miles per hour. It just needed 157 to be classified as a Category 5 hurricane. So this is just terrible news, especially for those directly in its path in the next day or so, and that includes the U.S. Virgin Islands and the northern coast of Puerto Rico, because notice it's still expected to be a Category 5 into Thursday before it heads into the Bahamas Friday, and should be somewhere near southern Florida or the western portion of Cuba early Sunday morning. And here is what's kind of the fly in the ointment when it makes that turn to the north, because all the computer models are pretty much in agreement through Friday that it's going to head into the southern Bahamas. Then where the north, the computer models now heading it right through Florida, but some of them now starting to shift it a little farther to the west, some of them a little farther to the east. So we'll know more about the long range forecast the more we get through the week. So stay tuned. We're going to see these small changes, which unfortunately even a small change would definitely impact greatly who is affected. And as we wait to see where Irma will go, and
this storm is now bearing down in the Caribbean and posing a major threat to millions of people, ultimately in Florida. Joining us now is Dr. Michael Brennan. He's the chief hurricane specialist at the National Hurricane Center. You know, we got here this morning, this thing had top speeds of 145 miles an hour. Now it's 175, and it looks like Puerto Rico and Islands could be in serious trouble.
Yeah, we're very concerned this morning about the northern Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. They're going to see potentially catastrophic impacts from the center of Hurricane Irma as it's going to affect those areas during the next day or two. Right now we have that core of 175-mile-an-hour winds near the center. We could see storm surge of 7 to 11 feet. That's certainly life-threatening and very, very heavy flooding rainfall. Those winds in the core are capable of catastrophic damage, total building failures, trees knocked down, severe damage to infrastructure in any location that gets the eye wall of Irma at this point.
So, Dr. Brennan, put this in context for us. If this is a Category 5, this is the strongest Atlantic hurricane since when?
Well, we had Category 5 Matthew in the Caribbean last year, so that was the first Category 5 we'd had in some time in the Atlantic. But Irma is a very, very powerful hurricane, regardless of whether it's Category 4 or 5. There's life-threatening impacts, again, from wind, storm surge, and heavy rainfall.
And every single model we see gives it some kind of impact on the United States, the continental United States, whether it be in western Florida or maybe even as you get over to the Panhandle right now. Is there anything that could slow it down before landfall?
Well, if the center of Irma were to move a little south of our forecast and perhaps over portions of Cuba or even Hispaniola, that could weaken the storm a little bit, but we're expecting it to remain on islands. Trying to pin down the impacts in Florida and elsewhere in the U.S. is really uncertain now. We do expect Irma to slow down and take some sort of northward turn as we get into Sunday and Monday, but the turn could occur and take the system west of the Florida Peninsula, over the peninsula, or along the east coast of the peninsula. And the details and timing of where that turn occurs have huge impacts on what areas are going to see the most impacts from the storm, and it's just too early to sort that out.
So what's your biggest concern at this hour?
Well, the biggest concern right now is for the folks in the northeastern Caribbean. They're the ones that are going to see the core of this devastating hurricane in the next day or two, and that's where we're most confident of where the impacts are going to occur. As we get later out in time, you know, we're concerned about the Hispaniola, the Bahamas, Cuba, Florida Keys, the Florida Peninsula. The main message for folks in Florida right now is these next few days are your chance to get ready, have your hurricane preparedness plan in place, know if you live in an evacuation zone and what you would do if you